Be me Thomas, 30. Work in IT doing the usual back-end maintenance and problem solving. Nothing legendary, but the salary keeps life comfortable. A couple of years ago, we even managed to lock down a modest house, little lawn out front. 2 bedrooms, classic quiet neighborhood setup. Been married to Ellen for about 3 years now. She's 28. In the beginning, everything felt easy. Weekend hikes, cooking together after work, random movie nights on the couch. Just normal couple routines. She had a quick mind, a good sense of humor, and this kind of restless enthusiasm that pulled you in. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Life was stable. I worked my 9 to 5, came home, and we had our routine. I paid most of the bills. She worked part-time at an office doing admin stuff. It worked for us, or so I thought. The last year or so, things started to change. Slowly at first. You barely notice it. It was like a software update running in the background. And one day you wake up and the whole OS is different. She started spending more time on her phone. A lot more. Always scrolling through TikTok or some articles her friends sent her. This one friend, let's just say she wasn't a fan of men in general. Every time Ellen came back from a wine night with her, the air in the house felt different, colder. Suddenly, our normal life was a problem. My wanting to just chill on a Friday night after a long week was me being uninspired. My paying for our vacation was me creating a power imbalance. Little phrases started creeping into her vocabulary. Toxic masculinity, patriarchal structures, emotional labor. I had no idea what half of it meant. I just knew it was always aimed at me. I'd come home from work and she'd be on the couch, laptop open. I'd ask how her day was and get a one-word answer. Then later, she'd complain that I don't engage with her on an intellectual level. I tried. I really did. I'd ask what she was reading. She'd sigh and say it was complicated, and I probably wouldn't get it. It felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells. I started just retreating into my own space, played video games, worked on projects in the garage, anything to avoid the inevitable conversation that would end with me being some kind of clueless oppressor. I just wanted peace. I figured it was a phase that it would pass. I was wrong. The conversation happened on a regular weeknight. Nothing special about it. I was in the kitchen making spaghetti, our go-to easy meal. Ellen walked in, phone in her hand, with a look on her face I'd never seen before. It was dead serious. She told me to turn off the stove. We needed to talk. My stomach dropped. This was it, the big one. We sat down at the dining table, the one I spent a whole weekend assembling. She took a deep breath and launched into a pre-rehearsed speech. It was about how she felt stifled in our marriage, how monogamy was a social construct designed to control women, how she loved me, but she also needed the freedom to explore other connections. My brain was trying to process the corporate buzzwords. I just stared at her. I asked her what she was actually saying. She finally dropped the script and looked me in the eye. I want an open marriage, Thomas. The spaghetti I was cooking felt like a lead weight in my gut. I think I just sat there in silence for a full minute. I asked if this was because of me, if I'd done something wrong. She shook her head. No, it wasn't my fault. It was the system. It was society's expectations. She felt like she was living a life that was chosen for her, not one she chose herself. She needed to feel empowered and autonomous. I tried to reason with her. We took vows. We promised to be faithful. Doesn't that mean anything? Her response was that those vows were part of the patriarchal system she was trying to escape. It was like talking to a stranger who had replaced my wife. The logic was circular. Everything I said was just proof of my traditionalist conditioning. I felt like I was losing my mind. I told her no, absolutely not. I wasn't interested in sharing my wife. Her face hardened. The calm, therapeutic voice was gone. So, you're going to hold me prisoner here? You're giving me an ultimatum? I told her this wasn't an ultimatum. It was a boundary, my boundary. Then she dropped the bomb. If you can't give me the freedom I need to be myself, then we can't be together. We'll have to get a divorce. Divorce. The word just hung in the air. My mind started racing. The house, the savings account, everything we'd built. I knew how it worked. I'd seen it happen to friends. The man gets taken to the cleaners. He loses the house, pays alimony, starts over from zero. She had me, and she knew it. She saw the panic in my eyes, and her voice softened again. The mask was back on. I don't want that, Thomas. I want us to evolve together. If you really love me, you'll support me in this." It was the most twisted emotional checkmate I'd ever seen. My choice was to either light a match to my entire life or to swallow my pride and dignity and agree to this nightmare. I sat there for what felt like an hour. In the end, I broke. I quietly said, "Okay." The look of triumph on her face was something I will never forget. She got up, hugged me, and said I wouldn't regret it. I already did. The next few days were a blur. Ellen was suddenly cheerful, giddy even. She drafted a set of rules for our new arrangement. It was all about communication and honesty, or so she said. The rules were basically, she could do whatever she wanted as long as she told me she was going out. There were no rules for me. The assumption was I wouldn't be doing anything. Why would I? I was the boring, stable husband, the home base she could return to after her adventures. It became clear very quickly that this wasn't a new idea. Her phone, which was always face down before, was now constantly buzzing. Tinder notifications, Hinge, Bumble. She'd been setting this up for weeks, maybe months. The talk wasn't a negotiation. It was an announcement. The first time she went out on a date, it was a Friday night. She spent 2 hours getting ready. New dress, one I'd never seen before. I later saw the charge for it on our joint credit card. She came out of the bedroom looking amazing, and for a second, my heart ached. I remembered when she used to get that dressed up for me. She just smiled, told me not to wait up, and walked out the door. The click of the lock echoed in the silent house. I was alone, in my own home, while my wife was out with another man. I didn't cook, I couldn't eat. I just sat on the couch and stared at the blank TV screen. I felt hollow, a ghost in my own life. She came home around 2 a.m. She was happy, tipsy, smelled like wine and some guy's cologne. I was still on the couch. She just breezed past me, said she had a nice time, and went to bed. No details, no, "How are you feeling about this?" I was just part of the furniture. That became the new normal. Tuesdays, Fridays, sometimes Saturdays. Ellen was out, exploring connections. I was home, doing laundry, paying bills, mowing the lawn. I was no longer a husband. I was a property manager, a roommate who paid for everything. The house, once our sanctuary, felt like a prison. I started losing weight. I couldn't sleep. At work, people asked if I was okay. I just mumbled something about a project being stressful. How do you tell your coworkers that your wife is dating other men and you agreed to it? You don't. You just bottle it up. I was sinking, drowning in my own life, and the person who was supposed to be my partner was the one holding my head underwater. Ellen, meanwhile, was flourishing, or so it seemed. She was always talking about how liberated she felt, how she was finally discovering her true self. It was all nonsense. She just wanted the thrill of being single without any of the risk. She still had me at home to pay the mortgage and fix the leaky faucet, the perfect safety net. I hit a new low one Saturday afternoon. She was getting ready to go out on a day date, a hike with some guy. She handed me a list of chores before she left. "Can you fix the garbage disposal and maybe clean the gutters? Thanks, honey." She kissed me on the cheek, a cold, casual peck, and left. I stood there in the kitchen holding a list of handyman tasks, and I just broke down. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't even a person to her anymore. I was a utility. That was the day I realized something had to change. I couldn't live like this. I didn't know what to do. The divorce threat still loomed over me. So I did the only thing I could think of to get out of the house and burn off the rage and misery. I joined a gym. It was one of those old school places. Lots of free weights, loud music, guys who were serious about lifting. I hadn't lifted weights since college. I was weak, skinny fat, and pathetic. I just put on my headphones, found an empty bench, and started lifting. It hurt. My muscles screamed, but it was a good pain. It was a pain I could control, unlike the one in my chest. I went every day after work. It became my ritual, my therapy. The anger I felt, I put it into the weights. The frustration, I used it for one more rep. I didn't talk to anyone, just went in, worked out until I was exhausted, and went home. After a few weeks, I started to see changes. I was getting stronger. My clothes started to fit a little better. More importantly, I had a part of my day that was just mine, a place where Ellen and her freedom couldn't touch me. One evening, I was struggling with a new personal record on the bench press. A big guy who was always there came over and offered to spot me. He was one of those genuinely friendly giants. We got to talking between sets, the usual gym small talk. He asked me what I did, I asked him. Standard stuff. We started working out around the same time pretty regularly. He was a good guy, divorced, had 2 kids. He had his life together. One day, he noticed I was having a particularly bad day. I was just throwing the weights around full of quiet rage. He asked me what was up. For some reason, I told him. I just laid it all out. The open marriage, the chores list, the feeling of being a doormat. I expected him to laugh or look at me with pity. He didn't. He just listened patiently. When I was done, he just nodded. He told me he'd seen it before. Then he said something that hit me like a ton of bricks. She's playing a game where she gets all the benefits of being married and all the fun of being single. You're funding her party. He was right. That's exactly what it was. But she said we'd get a divorce if I said no. He just looked at me. So, let her. But before that, you need to remember something. The door she opened, it swings both ways. He told me I was so focused on what I was losing that I wasn't seeing what I was being given. A free pass. She set the rules, man. All you have to do is play by them, better than she does. He told me to stop being a victim, to stop waiting for her to come to her senses, to take control of my own life. It was the simplest advice, but it was like a switch flipped in my brain. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of something other than despair. I felt hope. That conversation changed everything. I went home that night and saw things with new eyes. I saw the messy kitchen she'd left for me to clean. I saw the pile of her laundry. I saw a woman who took everything and gave nothing. The sadness I felt was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The next morning, I started making changes. First, I went to the bank. I opened a new checking account in my name only. I redirected my paycheck to that new account. I calculated my half of the mortgage and the essential bills, and set up an automatic transfer to our old joint account. Nothing more. Her shopping sprees, her expensive brunches, her Ubers to and from dates, that was her problem now. Second, I stopped being the maid. Her dishes stayed in the sink. Her laundry stayed in the hamper. The first time she noticed, she was annoyed. Why didn't you run the dishwasher? I just looked at her from my laptop and said, I was busy. The look of confusion on her face was priceless. It had never occurred to her that my time was valuable. Third, I invested in myself. I used the money I was no longer spending on her to buy new clothes. Clothes that actually fit the body I was building in the gym. I got a sharp haircut. I started standing up straighter, looking people in the eye again. I was starting to feel like myself again. Not Ellen's husband, just Thomas. The atmosphere in the house became icy. Ellen didn't like this new version of me. I was no longer compliant. I was no longer her emotional support animal. I was just there, a roommate. She'd come home from a date, and I wouldn't even look up from my book. I wouldn't ask how it was. I didn't care. Her power over me was based on my fear of losing her. But I realized I'd already lost her. The woman I married was long gone, and I was starting to realize I was better off without her. The final step was the hardest. My gym friend's words echoed in my head. The door swings both ways. I was terrified. My confidence was shot after months of being treated like I was worthless. The idea of putting myself out there was daunting, but I knew I had to. It was the only way to fully break free from her control. One night, while she was out with some new guy, I did it. I downloaded the apps, I took some new pictures, ones where I was actually smiling, not the forced grin from our old vacation photos. I wrote a simple, honest bio. IT guy, love hiking, lifting weights, looking for someone genuine to have a good conversation with. I hit save and tossed my phone on the couch, my heart pounding. I expected nothing. Absolute crickets. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a match, then another, and another. It was a strange feeling, to be seen again, to be wanted. I started a few conversations. They were awkward at first. I was rusty, but it was nice. Just talking to women who weren't analyzing my every word for signs of the patriarchy. Then I saw a profile that stood out. Her name was Kim. She was a barista at a local coffee shop. Her pictures weren't heavily filtered or posed, just a genuine warm smile. Her bio was short and sweet. Loves dogs, good coffee, and bad puns. She seemed normal, grounded. I hesitated for a moment, then sent her a message. Something simple, making a joke about her love for bad puns. I didn't expect a reply, at least not right away. My phone buzzed less than 5 minutes later. It was her. She was laughing at my joke. We started talking. The conversation was easy, effortless. We talked for over an hour, about everything and nothing. Before I knew it, I was asking her if she'd like to get coffee sometime. She said she'd love to. We set a time for that weekend. When Ellen got home later that night, I was still on the couch, but this time, I wasn't staring at a blank screen. I was smiling at my phone. She noticed. "What are you so happy about?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. I just looked up at her and gave her a genuine smile, the first one she'd seen from me in months. "Just making some new connections," I said, using her own words against her. "Exploring my freedom." The smug look on her face vanished. For the first time since this whole thing started, she looked worried. I went to bed that night and slept better than I had in a year. The game had changed. The weekend arrived faster than I expected. I was a nervous wreck before the date with Kim. What if I was awkward? What if she thought I was boring? All the confidence I'd built in the gym felt like it was evaporating. Ellen was home, which didn't help. She was watching me get ready with narrow eyes. She asked where I was going, trying to sound casual. I just said, "Out." I met Kim at the coffee shop where she worked, though she was off duty. She was even prettier in person. The moment we started talking, the nerves just melted away. It was so easy, so normal. She asked about my job and actually seemed interested. She didn't call it selling my soul to the corporate machine like Ellen did. She told me about her dream of opening her own flower shop someday. We talked for 2 hours, and it felt like 20 minutes. The whole time, she kept her phone in her purse. She was present, engaged. When the bill came, she reached for her wallet. She actually offered to split it. I was so taken aback I just stared for a second. Ellen hadn't offered to pay for anything in years. I insisted on paying, but the gesture itself spoke volumes. We walked out of the coffee shop, and I felt 10 feet tall. It was just coffee, but it felt like a lifeline. I came home that afternoon, and the mood in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ellen was on the couch, pretending to read a book. "So, how was out?" I just shrugged. It was nice. I wasn't going to give her any details. My life was no longer her business. She hated that. She was used to knowing everything, to being the center of my universe. Now, she was on the outside looking in, and it was driving her crazy. A new pattern began to form. My life started looking up. Kim and I went on another date, and another. We went hiking, the way Ellen and I used to. But this was different. Kim didn't complain about the bugs or how her new boots were giving her blisters. She just enjoyed being outdoors. She appreciated the simple things. I found myself smiling more, laughing. The heavy weight that had been sitting on my chest for months was finally starting to lift. In contrast, Ellen's empowerment journey seemed to be hitting some speed bumps. She was going out less. When she did, she came home in a sour mood. I started overhearing snippets of her phone calls with her friend. "He just stopped texting me. I think he was just using me. Why do guys only want one thing?" It was a slow-motion car crash, and I had a front-row seat. The hot, exciting world of casual dating she'd imagined wasn't what she'd found. The kind of men she was meeting weren't interested in her intellectual conversations or her feminist theories. They saw a married woman looking for a thrill and treated her as such, disposable. The irony was so thick you could taste it. She had a husband at home who had valued her for who she was, and she'd thrown it away to be treated like a commodity by strangers. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The house became 2 separate territories. I'd cook my own meals, clean up my own mess. She'd leave her stuff everywhere, expecting me to pick it up like the old days. It stayed there until she finally got sick of looking at it and cleaned it herself, sighing dramatically the whole time. She started trying to pick fights. She'd criticize how I loaded the dishwasher or the brand of coffee I bought. Anything to get a reaction, to get the old me back. I refused to engage. I'd just nod and say, "Okay," and walk away. It was called the gray rock method, my gym friend told me. You make yourself as boring and unresponsive as a gray rock. It worked. She couldn't fight with someone who wouldn't fight back. It just made her more and more frustrated. Things came to a head about 2 months after my first date with Kim. Kim and I were getting serious. We were spending almost every weekend together, usually at her place. Her small, clean apartment felt more like a home than my own house did. I came home late one Sunday night after a great weekend with her. Ellen was waiting up for me. The lights were dim. She'd clearly been stewing for hours. The moment I walked in, she started. "Where have you been?" "I was out." "Out? You're gone all the time, Thomas. You barely even talk to me anymore. We live like roommates." I just looked at her. "Whose idea was that, Ellen?" She flinched. "This isn't what I wanted," she said, her voice starting to crack. "I thought this would bring us closer, that we could be honest about our needs." I almost laughed. Honest. She hadn't been honest for a second. "I'm not happy," she continued. This experiment, it's not working. It's hurting our marriage." I just stayed silent, letting her talk. "I want to close the marriage," she said, the words rushing out. "I want it to be just us again, like it was before." There it was, the moment I knew was coming. The party was over, and she wanted her safe, comfortable life back. The old me would have jumped at the chance. I would have been so relieved. But I wasn't the old me anymore. I looked at her, at this woman who had so casually and cruelly broken my heart for her own selfish thrill-seeking, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. I took a calm breath. "No," I said. The word just hung in the air between us. Her eyes widened. What do you mean, no?" "I mean no. I'm not closing the marriage. You were the one who wanted this, remember? You said it was about freedom, about exploring ourselves. I'm finally doing that. And it turns out, I like it." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She was completely unprepared for me to say no. In her mind, I was still her backup plan, her property. "You're seeing someone, aren't you?" she demanded. "Yes," I said. "I am, just like you've been seeing people." The reality of it finally hit her. This wasn't just me getting back at her. This was me moving on. The panic set in. The tears started. "But I'm your wife. You can't just choose someone else over me." "You're the one who brought other people into this marriage, Ellen," I said, my voice still quiet and even. "You opened the door. You don't get to be surprised when I walk through it." She started sobbing, the real ugly kind of crying. She begged. She pleaded. She said she'd made a terrible mistake. It was too little, too late. I just turned around and went to the guest room where I'd been sleeping for weeks. I closed the door on her and her tears. For the first time, I felt truly free. The next week was hell. Ellen tried everything. She tried being nice, making my favorite dinner. She tried getting angry, yelling at me for being cold and heartless. She tried to get intimate, which was the most desperate and pathetic move of all. I rebuffed all of it. I was polite but distant. I was a stone wall. She was losing, and she was getting desperate. Her last-ditch effort was to call in reinforcements. Her friend, the one who had filled her head with all this nonsense, came over one evening. I was in my home office trying to get some work done. I could hear them talking in the living room. Ellen was crying, telling her friend a heavily edited version of the story, a version where I was the villain, the cold, cheating husband who was abandoning her in her time of need. I heard her friend saying all the predictable things. "He's a classic narcissist. He's gaslighting you. You need to leave him and take him for everything he's worth." I'd had enough. I walked out of the office and into the living room. They both stopped talking and stared at me. Ellen looked terrified. Her friend looked at me with pure contempt. I ignored the friend and looked directly at Ellen. "Are you done?" I asked. Before she could answer, her friend jumped in. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she spat. "Treating your wife like this, running around with some other woman." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get angry. I just walked over to the desk by the window where we kept important papers. I shuffled through a few files and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the rules for our open marriage that Ellen had so excitedly written a few months back. Her handwriting was all over it. I walked back and placed it on the coffee table in front of them. "Ellen, a few months ago, you told me that if I didn't agree to this," I said, tapping the paper, "you would divorce me. You said you needed the freedom to sleep with other men. I was heartbroken, but I agreed because I was scared of losing everything. For months, I sat in this house alone while you went on dates. I was miserable." I paused, letting it sink in. "Then I decided to play by your rules. The same rules you wrote, I started working on myself. I started dating. And now that I've found some happiness, you want to change the rules back because your little experiment didn't work out the way you planned. I finally looked at her friend. So, before you tell me I should be ashamed, you should ask your friend to tell you the whole story. The friend's face was a picture of confusion. She looked from the paper to me to Ellen. She had no idea. Ellen had painted herself as the victim, the faithful wife wronged by a cruel husband. The silence was deafening. Ellen just sat there, head down, completely exposed. Her own words on that piece of paper had condemned her. Her friend just mumbled something about having to leave and practically ran out of the house. Public humiliation complete. Ellen didn't look at me. She just sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of the lies she had built. I didn't say another word. I just went back to my office and closed the door. That was the end. I knew I couldn't live there anymore. I couldn't live like that anymore. I spent the next couple of weeks getting my ducks in a row. I spoke to a lawyer just to make sure I was doing everything by the book. I found a new apartment, a small one-bedroom place closer to my work. I packed my things quietly, mostly when Ellen wasn't home. She was like a ghost. We barely spoke. The fight had gone out of her. She knew she had lost. The final day, I packed the last of my boxes into my car. I came back inside to do one last sweep. Ellen was on the couch, watching some reality TV show. She was pretending I wasn't there. I walked over and placed a folder on the coffee table next to her. She looked at it. It was filled with divorce papers. "I've signed them all," I said. "You just need to sign and have your lawyer look them over. It's a fair split, no fault." She didn't say anything, just stared at the folder. "The lease on this house is up in 2 months," I continued. "I won't be renewing it. I've already paid my half for the remaining time. You'll need to figure out what you're going to do." I turned to leave. "Thomas," she said, her voice small. I stopped at the door, but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I just stood there for a moment. "I know," I said, and I walked out the door, closing it gently behind me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt light. Be me now. 6 months later, my apartment is small, but it's mine. It's peaceful. Kim and I are still together. It's the healthiest, happiest relationship I've ever been in. She respects me. She appreciates me. We're a team. We're talking about getting a place together next year. Maybe getting a dog. I go to the gym. I work. I spend my evenings with a woman who actually likes me. Life is good. Simple, but good. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Ellen had to move out of the house. Couldn't afford the rent on her own. She's living in a small apartment across town, working full-time now. Still single. Still swiping on Tinder. She wanted freedom. She got it. I guess sometimes you get exactly what you ask for.